This is a sequel. It has been 1 year to the day since I've had Sarah on the show, a woman who has catalyzed subscribers to my channel more than any other single person, any other one person that there is. Don't mean to indicate that you're single. And she has since then landed a spot on Gaia. And of her most amazing achievements, also she's a proud owner of a library of the Untold Hoodie, which is and so that being said, there's no wonder they call you the alchemist, because everything you touch turns to gold, including my channel, and which thrives. By the way, every time you mention me, I look at my analytics, and I just stare at my analytics with excitement, because it rockets every time, because people take you very seriously. And also, on that regard, you have something in common with me. Neither one of us have sponsors on our channels. Neither one of us are interrupting our videos with 60-second ads. I can tell you why I don't, but I'd love to hear why you don't.
Well, I don't, just because of my subject matter.
Yeah,
Well, first of all, I know I'm animated when I teach, but actually I'm quite awkward when it comes to hawking something.
right,
So I just won't do it because I don't have to. I'm actually very, very grateful that I
right,
don't have to, because I know other people might have to, or I don't know. I'm actually not worried about if other people have to or not. I've never thought about other people's whatever, but I'm just glad I don't have to. And
right.
I've specifically designed all of my energy to go into my work so that then it gets returned in my practice.
Absolutely.
So I've designed it to where, if you want to work with me, that's how I get my funding for things. Therefore, I don't need to go and interrupt anything with things that, and if people do have alignment with some sort of collaboration, I
Right,
am not a prude. I think that alignment is how the new earth will manifest the new earth. It's through collaborations, but
right.
there's not one to me that's like, oh my God, it's so important that I need to have a 60-second whatever.
It goes to show that you can't be bought, and that you live by your word, and you walk the walk rather than talk the talk. And that's something that can be seen in your videos. One of your videos in particular recently, I almost didn't click. I click on all your videos, but this one I was about to skip because it seemed less esoteric, and it was about love, relationships, heartache, and stuff like that. But I was like, yeah, why would I skip one? I clicked it, and I was in the bathroom shaving, and there was so many jaw-dropping moments in that video that just helped me understand why I feel the way I do sometimes, that otherwise would not have occurred to me. And there's a way that your videos have a way of piercing into the viewer's heart specifically, like you're talking to me. And I have this idea that I'm self-reflective, and I've got knowledge of the self and all that stuff. And when I watch one of your videos, I almost feel a bit of imposter syndrome, because the way you're speaking these things makes it personal, to where I feel like I can express myself more enthusiastically and healthily after seeing some of your videos.
Oh,
So
wow, that's a huge honor. Also, just to add there, because when you said imposter syndrome, my spidey senses went up.
yeah,
If you have imposter syndrome, that's not necessarily the most negative thing in the world.
hope
I used
hope
to
not.
get that I used to get that the most when I started my energy healing practice, the most.
Okay,
And now I actually help healers, because a large part of my practice is helping people
the
who
wounded
already do things
healer,
like that. Yeah.
right?
And oh man, half the blocks are even gone before the session because I'm explaining really like normal things. And
Right.
one of them is imposter syndrome. It's this thing where it's like energy isn't real, all these things isn't real and stuff like that. And the stuff still works, so it helped my left brain, it helped my logical mind. But then after a while, what I noticed was that there's always going to be, if you are a sincere and open person,
Hmm.
something that we can call the energy of imposter syndrome, and that it's almost at a certain level. Now don't get me wrong, it could attack you. So
Yeah.
if the self-awareness of being open is pointed this way, it can attack you. That's not helpful. I'm not saying it's helpful. But it's one of those things where it's better because it's a sign of us being open
Yeah.
versus people who are so closed they don't ever question themselves, and
Hmm.
therefore they never experience any form of doubt, and
Right.
then that doubt is what we're interpreting sometimes as the energy of imposter syndrome.
Right. That's when it kicks in for me is typically if I'm reading Manly P. Hall. I
Um,
will literally I'll put the book down and be like, "What are you doing? Why are you covering these subjects? Manly P. Hall did it, and you are a." And to myself, I'm saying I'm a baby, right? And it makes reading his work, and then I have to like shake myself out and be like, "Okay, no, he's dead." And somebody needs to at least put him in front of people. So if nothing else, I can sort of cure my imposter syndrome by both not taking sponsors and by bringing you the work of dead men his death was very mysterious, but that's for a different subject altogether. But I mean, whenever astrology, for example, is one of those subjects that I never really got around to because it's tainted with a modern notion of like horoscopes and strip mall, as you know, that kind of stuff. Until I read it was a Star Lore of Babylon by Manly P. Hall, and he just put all the puzzle pieces together in such a way that made me realize that uh, electricity and magnetism, which is our entire reality, is like the hard drive of which our reality is built into. So it's not, it would actually be more weird if astrology did not have an effect on us. And I'm telling you, the other day, when Mars was like right there, right outside my window, I could feel it in my chest. I was having like panicking sensations that I could not identify until I looked up and it was just orange. Boop, right there in the sky, you know? And today we
wow.
have this alignment of like 7 planets, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. So everything we say is like a pure channel.
This what's amazing is that when I emailed you to ask you to come back on the show for our 1 year anniversary, when I closed the email, the first thing that popped up on my phone was set your calendar for the 25th for this planetary alignment. And I was like, I'll take that as a healthy synchronicity right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's intense. It's 7 planets, right?
7 planets, which, as far as I'm concerned, is all of them,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's all we can see.
Yeah.
So, I
Oh,
mean,
hold on.
unless
Let
you
me
have
take a
like
photo.
a telescope or whatever. What I found amazing recently was I set up a telescope outside of my porch. All of the planets outside of Earth can be seen as a perfect sphere, but the planets between the sun and us appear as crescents. And that's often how Venus was depicted back in the day. In fact, Coral Castle, when he depicts Venus, he depicts it as a crescent, just like he does the moon, because that's how they appear from Earth subjectively to us. I thought that was a neat little nugget.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But when it comes to astrology, hermetics, and all that stuff, I picked up these units the other day. So I got the Hermetica, and I'm leaving out of this. I'm leaving out the Kabbalion. I got the Kabbalion up there, of course, but I know that that's a newer thing. But the Hermetica, this is a companion for that. But I also have the Divine Pymander, and around here somewhere is Asclepius. I have not dove in head first to them yet. But I wanted to ask you about them. Mainly, what's the differences? Because they all seem, whenever I look into them, they seem to be the same thing.
So this is, I mean, depending on the audience's type of what they find intriguing, I think this is an intriguing topic. And that because it goes deeper than that. It's how books traveled back in the day by the printers.
Okay,
So the printing companies revolutionized the way that things were read and the access to them.
right.
So in the Renaissance particularly, and I forget the name of the presses, but there was like Albine press.
Okay.
and then later Bastille Press, and then something like Octavius or something.
Right.
So they would actually control the way that these copomendiums or these tractites would
Copomendiums. Let me write that down. Sweet.
th-
Quite the
so
word.
yeah, we could call them fragments. Let's call them fragments.
I like
So
copomendiums.
so the fragments would travel together, and the publishers or the printing houses would decide how to put them. So let's say that you opened up a book in the Renaissance that was really popular. It would have the Hermeticum, which was known at that time as the Trismegistus Pymander.
Okay.
But then it was also called at the end of that Asclepius.
Right.
So it was called like the Trismegistus Pymander Asclepius. Pymander means good shepherd, but really that's why it's called the divine Pymander, because good actually can get translated into divine, and everything I'm going to say and have said gets lost in translation.
Of
So
course.
so I mean, I'm going into something I think is fun, but if I wanted to just give you a brief answer, I would say all of this got lost in translation. They're all the same book. So
Okay.
the
That's what I was
divine,
picking up on, I think. Yeah.
yeah, the divine Pymander was a later name from a later translation, but it came from Poimander. So Poimander meaning the good shepherd, or Pymander meaning the good shepherd.
Okay.
So Pymander, oh no, not Poimander. Poimandres, or who's that? Who Poimandres? Hermes' higher self who speaks to him in that second
Oh, it's like
fragment.
Daemon. Yeah.
Poimandres.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. His diamond. So that is actually what divine Pymander means. That's was its name.
Okay. And so
So
Asclepius was like the son or part of the he was the one receiving the information.
So the sun was Tat, but I don't know why they really honed in on Asclepius, which is Asclepius, the healer. That it was actually the healer's son.
Okay.
So Hermes is talking to Asclepius's son, Asclepius.
I see. Okay. There's a lot they're just keeping the same name going. I know that when reading Agrippa, he considered the following book, the one we're talking about, all three or one, whichever way you look at it, he considered it to be divinely inspired, just the same as the Bible. And in a way, he did his due diligence in creating a continuum between Hermetics, which was predating the Bible, into his Christianity. And I say his Christianity because modern day Christianity is quite different from what it once was, obviously, but he considered it to be divinely inspired. And I think that's kind of what almost drove me into wanting to, I don't want to say take it more seriously because I've always taken it seriously, but to actually break down the codex enough to cover on this channel in depth as opposed to just referring to it. You know, so like the seven hermetic principles, and that all of those are found within the Hermeticum or the divine Pymander, or is that
So here's another thing. The Hermeticum,
uh
as it stands, I don't even trust, because like I was talking about, everything got lost in translation. These printers would print these books, and they would control the order that which your Renaissance mind would see these things. And so it got pretty much put, Hermeticism in and of itself means something different to whatever location, to however they packed. Because, okay, so let's say you take these fragments that I'm talking about. It
yeah,
wasn't just the Hermeticum in a book. So, okay, let me back up. Asclepius is, inside the divine Pymander, and
okay,
inside the Hermeticum, Asclepius is last. But
okay,
that got turned into, when it was found in the Nag Hammadi Codex, it was not called Asclepius. It was called the Perfect Discourse.
that's right, okay,
So this is what's important. It's that the way that the manuscripts were transcribed, somebody probably read Asclepius and went, okay, well, the theme of this, and one of the main the theme, because it starts with saying this is the perfect discourse or something
right,
like that. So they
right,
took that and they said the perfect discourse. So how did how did Hermeticism get linked up with a predominantly Gnostic Nagamati? Now,
Right.
I actually think that that was a good mix, whoever mixed that. And I actually think that could have possibly been divine intervention. But anyways,
And that's
h-
interesting.
well, like, why do we find fragments all these times that just show up? And I know, like,
Right.
people discover things, but I don't, like, really believe that. So I just
I
think things are planted.
there's an argument that no one really ever brings up whenever people talk about the Gospel of Thomas, anything, the Book of Enoch, and they say, "Oh, that's not canon because it came after, or it was found after, or whatever, or the Council of Nicaea, all that stuff." At the end of the Bible, it says very specifically, no one can add or take away from this particular book, and if you do, the Lord will, rectify it. What if that is exactly what's going on? Because people took books out of the Bible, and maybe it was whenever that kid threw the rocks and he found the vases with the codices, that's God's way of putting his books right back in it. But what's fascinating about all of those texts is that there's a theme to some of those that it was like the first podcast. It's the first podcast
Yeah.
because think about it. Now the books I am very familiar with, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Gospel of Thomas. All of those have something in common with Asclepius. The layout is it's a podcast. It's a conversation between a student and a teacher, which I guess isn't necessarily a podcast is just two people, but that's subjective. There is something to that. It's not like the Bible. It's not just uh, reading out facts or allegory, but it's laid out in such a way that you are there witnessing a conversation between two people. I wonder if that's because it makes it more homely, readable, comfortable to read, or I wonder because that was a popular thing back then.
Yeah, and that's the actually that's it's funny that Asclepius is called the perfect discourse because the perfect way for a person to learn is through a discourse. So that name was correct by saying that. It's
Right.
easier to learn through the nature of dialogue and dialectic that's created from dialogue than from a singular person that's teaching.
Yeah. I,
And
I
that's why podcasts are so successful, and that's why they're
right.
gonna evolve into conversations like this,
Right.
because the person who's podcasting will eventually come to a place in their own growth and own evolution to where they'll go, "Well, I know stuff too," and that's fine because everyone has their own growth curve. So what that's gonna do over time is create a larger and larger ripple effect where there's gonna be more conversations than actual interviews.
That's
No, don't let that stop you from asking me questions. I'm just
no,
telling you what is gonna happen. I
no,
can ask you a
absolutely not.
question if you want.
This is whenever I have a guest on the show, the mood is different per person. But when I have you on the show, it's going to be primarily to ask questions because I mean you're just very well read on these things in the first place. Somebody in the chat I just saw, they wrote the host should have done better research before this interview, and that's what I'm doing right now, bub. So yeah, but no, yeah. So, but I've noticed that in conversation, it sparks more of these ideas. I I could know a subject very well and type about it, but something magical happens when someone asks me about it for whatever reason that creates a sort of a creative urgency within my mammalian mind to be able to answer the question as creatively and sharply as possible. I think that there is something about dialogue that creates kind of a fire, a friction between two people. Whereas if you have information coming direct from one person, it is information. But when it's a dialogue, you have both people in this ping pong, and it's like what with our last interview we almost couldn't finish two sentences in a row without the other one being like, "Oh, that reminds me of this. That reminds me of that." And we had a bunch of what we called very pleasant interruptions. And yeah, the dialogue seems to create an avenue for creative speech, for lack of a better description, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I'm sure you might be familiar with Hegelian dialect.
I am not.
So
Again, the guy
Hegel's
said I should have
dialect.
done my research better, so but
Well, so the what you were calling the fire,
mhm,
that's a great word for it because that's like that's the friction. It's not really friction, but it is the dialect. It's a dialectic where the ping pong creates that fire, and that's the best way for people to learn.
right.
It's by going through question and answer, and then that question and then that answer creates a third. Now Hegelian
Yeah,
dialect's usually only known in its negative form, which is problem, reaction, solution. But the dialectic itself is neutral. It's just how it's used.
okay. No, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. There's a three-part, there's a trifecta happening there. There's a holy trinity of information, I guess you could say, in that. That reminds me of like the Gnostic notion of the monad, Sophia, and of course the Christ, which is like out of the two comes the three, and then out of the three comes all things. It's almost like all of these things are under that umbrella, quite literally speaking, you know. So why should anything be any different? Whenever I see like the alchemical plate of the philosopher's stone, whenever you have Hermes and he's got that compass and he's drawing on that, like that brick wall, that that becomes something due to the trifecta, the triangle. It's the first shape, it's the first time that matter can exist. And I find that to be kind of fascinating too, especially because concerning fire or pyre, I don't know if that relates to Pymander, but the symbol for it is, the alchemical symbol is a triangle.
Yeah, and so I have been completely distracted. You have Body Electric, the book behind you?
Yeah, yeah. I so what caused that? I love your subject changer.
Sorry.
Uh, I started reading The Cygnus Mystery by Andrew Collins, which talks about how one of the parts is how fruit flies are can be mutated with cosmic rays. They emulated or replicated cosmic rays in labs, and they noticed that the DNA, the genome of beings, of living beings, are changed when they are come into contact with cosmic rays. Cygnus is what they call a neutron star. And I know it's a constellation, but the neutron star gives off these particular cosmic rays that inignorably change living organisms. No one knows exactly quite how it works, but I found that to be so interesting that, I mean, it ties together a lot of things about human evolution, so to speak, creationism, and how things change on Earth, especially like how technology happened so quickly. But then reading about how certain slugs can trade memory between them, and
Heard of that.
that drove me crazy. So it ended up getting me to the Body Electric, which is a whole nother monster that I have not maybe gotten about a quarter way through yet. The book is beautifully illustrated, and the guy does his homework. It's one of those things where if you were to tell me what was going on in this book, I would react by going, nah, nah, I'll believe it when I see it. But when they back it up by showing their work and all of the things that they have done, you start to like, maybe the placebo effect is something that we can harness and use for our own good, for our own bodies and minds on a daily basis. This scientific research is thorough. Despite being on the fringe, it's a good job.
I healed my gums receding through a homeopath that was created from that book.
Are
And
you serious?
I was not trying to heal my gums. I was trying to heal something else. And instead, it just started regenerating all the cells in my body. And then it even plumped my face out. Yeah.
Oh my God. So the reason you look fantastic and your eyebrow game is on point is because of the body electric. I can't believe it. This is
Well,
very revealing.
now it's just about, treating EBV, the normal stressor behind autoimmunity. So
Okay.
yeah, so it is definite. It's no longer that I'm not taking those remedies anymore
Okay.
because I don't need them. But
Can,
yeah,
can you
no,
tell me
it's been a journey.
what? So can you tell me? I don't if it's too personal,
No.
but what specifically did you do that was recommended by the book?
So the homeopathist I was with at the time had studied that book, and then I bought it because he was doing some research based off of the information in that book and creating remedies.
Okay.
And so how they were taught as was, okay, so your bones have like spaces in them.
Yeah.
And so what this would do is go in there specifically, it's like a multivitamin on steroids, and create whatever was needed in the body, almost like a surrogate stem cell, and replicate things to where it would knit the bone. Like fill in the bone thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
is that is crazy. And so you are living proof of
Yes.
this
Yeah.
subject matter.
And it's not placebo because I wasn't aiming for my gums and they healed on their own. So my mind wasn't even focused on that.
That's incredible. So let me ask you this: so my life changed after the Wim Hof method and breathing and yoga. Something that I do every day now, first thing in the morning, because I've told my viewers a couple times, you can't. Well, the members only viewers, sorry, but you can't have a bad day after you start your day with yoga and breathing exercises. And the results of my life have I mean, you can see it on the channel. I look different than I did in my older videos, and I can't recommend these things enough. I might as well ask you: is there any sort of daily meditation ritual that you partake in?
Yeah, I meditate in the morning. Yeah,
Okay,
I have to. Yeah.
what's your method of meditation? Is it zazen? Is it
So I used to do Christ consciousness meditations a lot with like a global meditation community. I literally go into 0 point now. Like I used to go into okay, so my work, I go into altered states of consciousness
mhm,
for literally my living.
naturally?
Naturally, I would need to go into the gamma brainwave state through music for a long time, and I don't need to anymore. As a matter of fact, my new issue is like, for instance, if we're talking, it's like not going into gamma. Because
Okay,
then, like, I'd rather be like beta Sarah or alpha Sarah, like toned here so that we can connect on a human basis, not like the Mr. Burns episode where you're like, I bring you love.
right,
So, but yeah, so the issue is like grounding more, but it's very easy for me to go into altered states because you do it enough to get into gamma that, I mean, all that Joe Dispenza stuff's correct. Like you'll start operating with that harmony of those hemispheres and you start
right.
literally shifting your reality. So when I meditate in the morning, it's not under any form of thing. I go literally into stillness. And honestly, I get asked one of the most common questions I get asked is I want to connect more with my higher self or I want to connect more with fill in the blank.
Mhm.
And it's a very sober experience, and I think we want very ecstatic experiences, and I think that's the major block because I go
Yeah.
into stillness. Stillness is boring. I don't know how to package it, market it, and sell it back to you. It's
Right.
like it's boring. So it's
Right.
just stillness.
This is the obvious reason that the medical industry has not embraced yoga and meditation because there's no way to profit from it. Unlike that Eli Roth, I think the transcendental meditation guy, what a ripoff, dude. That was, I bought his book. It was a mistake. I threw it away. But that was one of the most nonsensical things I'd ever read. Not to be negative, but
No, I don't know who he is.
he started selling meditation. He said that you're doing it wrong unless you buy. my program, which I didn't know he was saying stuff like that until I actually read his book, and I was like, wow. But but what you're saying, the 0 point thing, reminds me of, okay, when Jesus was talking about meditation, which a lot of Christians say that he was not, he was, he said, quote, take no thought. This is fascinating to me because he didn't say have no thoughts. He said take no thought. There's nothing that he said that was an accident. It wasn't like he mixed up his words. And I dwelt on that for a moment. And the realization that came to me, and tell me your thoughts on this, is if he was to say have no thought, that would indicate that your mind generates thoughts. But by saying take no thought, that indicates that the mind is a receiver for ideas and thoughts, and that you can say no thank you to them coming in. Does this make any sense?
Absolutely. So a good teacher will mix up the way they say things
Okay.
so that if it's coming from one angle constantly, you'll be able to relate to it and you'll almost go numb from it. So if
Yeah.
somebody's hearing in old day speech, have no thought, and it probably won't be have no thought. It will probably be everything gets lost in translation.
Right.
But let's like pretend that it was their version of have no thought. Then take no thought is more compelling. It will mix up the habitual. You will think from a different angle. You'll
Yeah.
go, take no thought. Like that's a creative way of saying, if you say have no thought, great. Now you're up against the gods. If
Right.
you say take no thought, now it makes so much more liberty of going, oh, okay. Like it's
Yeah.
giving you a creative spin on a teaching.
That's exactly what it did for me, because it was the word take. And I first heard it from Bill Donahue and his one of his mini lectures on his YouTube channel. Brilliant old man. But yeah, take no thought. It became one of those things where when I'm having trouble with meditation, clearing and emptying my cup, I will say it to myself. I'll in my head, I'll say, okay, take no thought starting now. And almost like, it's like I used to say, I wonder what my next thought will be, because you kind of trick your brain in that moment to having silence. And I recommend that to anybody who, the hardest part of meditation is to clear your head, and some people can't even for one moment. If you say I wonder what my next thought is going to be, and you invite it in for whatever backwards ass placebo reason, it makes your brain stop thinking for like 3 seconds, and you can actually, like, when the thought comes, trace it back to whatever issue might be stemming from whatever source. And that's what I've noticed, that instead of clearing your head in meditation, for people who are early in their meditative career, instead of trying to block out the thoughts, which is a chore, just let the thoughts pass through and see how they connect. And then by the time you trace it back, you might have a realization that otherwise wouldn't have occurred to you with all the thinking. And frankly, sometimes the thinking derails us from the answers we're looking for, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if you get this. You kind of like hinted that you possibly could, but I know that it's a specific vibe of females. I notice that get this too, and
Mm.
I'm one of them. So when I have a client who's a female that gets this, I like say this whole thing that would normally be vague and abstract, and they go like, "Oh my God, that's exactly my problem. I never knew that that was a thing. That's a thing," and it's this it's like
Yeah,
this imprint from a high level of cosmos that you're wrong and that you're doing something very wrong.
I
And
see.
so, yeah. And so, meditation for me doesn't mean that I need to like stillness is like I said very boring. So that's not when this comes up, but it usually comes up as I'm like living life, especially as a spiritual teacher, you're very visible teaching things that creates a lot of in the aggregate tension that
Yeah,
then gets dispersed through different outlets that want to attack you. And so that energy comes up of like I'm wrong. Like I'm wrong. I'm doing something wrong. I should not be doing like this is wrong. And it's really just a high level existential imprint of wrongness.
Yeah.
And so what I do is just go straight into like the love behind it. Like I go into almost like if I think that somebody, for instance, is going like they think this of you and they think whatever and stuff like that, like I notice it first as it being this like aggregate that is
Yeah.
targeting at, and then after that I go like, oh, and I go into like the love
Right.
of the love of the self who feels wrong. I go into
Okay.
like the compassion of the self that feels wrong. I really feel called to share that, even though that's super niche. I'm not sure many people will have that issue, but I just felt like since we were flowing and that needed to be said, like a lot of times it could be something that at the mental body needs to be addressed as like being emptied, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's the mental body coming through that door, but actually laying at a deeper level at the emotional body that wants some sort of reassurance or wants some sort of advocate that can
Yeah.
embrace them.
Yeah.
So it really
Absolutely.
depends because emotional
Right.
work can turn into meditation where so the mind and the body can really like kind of like interlace with each other at first when a person just starts doing any form of inner work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there is, and I'm not surprised that people spark up and say, "Oh, that's exactly," because that feeling of wrongness is haunting. It'll wrench you right in the gut, and it's a difficult thing to bear with. But I notice it helps if if you understand that wrongness in general does not necessarily decrease your authenticity. There is a difference. You can be wrong about something, and all of us are sometimes. But if you have your authenticity on point, that wrongness will evaporate as it goes throughout. However, on the opposite end of that spectrum, if your wrongness is backed up by a specific belief system, or what's the term called? Confirmation bias, or Dunning Kruger, which I've
Yeah.
there are people with that. And anyways, but and you know what I'm talking about. But
Yes, I do.
wrongness will explode in your face the moment that your authenticity is dissipative, even in the slightest. And I know I brought it up before, but everyone knows that I've been one to. Last time we talked, we were ripping on the guy who thinks he's a reincarnation of Edgar Casey. But Wilcox, right? And then we even touched upon, and this is before he did this to himself, Billy Carson. I've always, since the beginning of this channel, had a difficult time with Billy Carson. It's not just the cold, dead eyes, it's the fact that he calls himself a teacher and calls himself an expert. And his wrongness exploded in his face recently on a little interview podcast he did with a channel that was tiny at the time. Now it's blown up. And are you familiar with this?
I did not see it myself.
It's,
Um
oh, it's hard to watch.
I there here's the thing. I
Mm,
don't follow Billy's work, but I like him, and here's why.
okay.
He has changed. I know that people have their issues with him, and I'm not stopping them from that. But you have to understand that it's very hard as a female spiritual teacher to kind of teach the high level teachings I'm teaching
Hmm.
by myself and energetically. I'm only talking energetically. Billy has been very strong at turning the curve of the spiritual community that keeps getting targeted to go Christian, keeps
Okay.
getting psyop after psyop after psyop to go Christian. And I don't agree with all of his theses. But the fact that he's been at one point, at one very crucial interjection, we agree on a very strong point, and
Okay.
he's been very forceful about that, which is the God is inside. You,
Yes.
maybe he doesn't use the same words, inner Christos. I don't know all of his views. I might not even agree with all of them, but this one thing has really helped turned the energetic tide in the spiritual community because everyone left and right goes into the Christian psyop.
Okay.
There's a huge empirical agenda that's even beyond this, it's beyond the physical form. There's an empirical minded agenda that keeps pushing false light. And I would say Christianity is false light. Um, to so that's what I have to say about him. So anyone could say whatever they want about him. I'm just letting you know I why I'm neutral and I won't be the first one to throw stones at him.
Of course, right. And my intention was never throwing stones or anything like that. My intention was more along the lines of, if you're found saying something that's not true, just basic that authenticity, say, damn, I got that wrong, and then move on. Whereas his reaction to what happened was awful. And in that same regard, people have emailed me talking about, they invested in his thing and didn't get a return, and then they found out it was actually a donation, and that kind of lit me up a little bit, because when it comes to the things that are esoteric, of course we've got to make money to make a living, to do what we're
Uh-huh.
doing, because we're doing work, you know.
Mhm.
But deception and is well the opposite of what needs to happen there. And and perhaps I should leave it alone, but at the same time I want people to understand that there's a middle ground between the esoteric and Christianity. And to be frank, Christianity nowadays, like we said a little bit earlier, is completely different than it was once upon a time, and it's tainted now. People are, in fact, if I was to pinpoint a particular person who's the least Christian I know of, it wouldn't be an atheist. It would be a Christian. And that's a difficult thing to swallow, because I've seen Christian people who are mean, mean to people, based on their own faith and where
Yeah.
they think they're left
Oh,
out.
biggest narcissist.
Yes,
Biggest narcissist I've ever the biggest narcissists, and they hate women. They do.
it's a problem.
Gnostic men love women. Do you know
Right.
I've never had an issue with a Gnostic man? A Gnostic man has had incarnation after incarnation where they are developed. They're more evolved. And it tells because they have such an equilibrium inside themselves that they don't view a woman as a threat.
Of course.
Christian men hate women unless no, they still hate women, but they hate women and they go, "Get below me. Who do you think you are teaching?" Like they're offended at your existence. Gnostic men have only been so respectful
Mhm.
and so loving and so like not a problem.
It fascinates me, the entire subject of, like, Pope Gregory was the first guy. So Mary Magdalene was never a prostitute. It was never recorded that she was.
Yeah.
And that's what Christians believe nowadays, because a man, some fat, pale, wet dude, old guy named Pope Greg, decided to call her a hooker one day, and it caught on. Why did it catch on? The Bible, the New Bible, I don't say New Bible, but they changed the names of heroines in the Bible to men's names. And I can't help but wonder if some of these things in the Bible were added by men who were misogynistic, who realized the power that was in their hands right now, whether it's the Council of Nicaea or later in the 1600s when they were all, or the Catholics who have just willy nilly changed the book to whatever they feel is the best. But there's no way that women are considered lesser in any of these spiritual sects at their origin. The Dogon tribe are a living reflection of ancient times, and their highest priestess initiate is a woman. The Vikings considered women to be psychic and intuitive. They counseled with women before they went to war. It's the line goes on of how women are held in great esteem for having a powerful Well, they didn't know the difference at the time between right brain and left brain, but women are extremely right brained and intuitive. That's why you can't lie to them. And spoiler alert to anybody who thinks they're slick out there, if you've lied to a woman and they bought it, it's because they're pretending. They know your facial features if they know you well enough, and you can't lie to them like you can a man. All of this stuff about women being of a lesser class than men in within the esoteric is literally new, like less than 500 years old if you consider Pope Gregory being one of the catalysts of it. But I'm not saying that to be pandering. I'm saying that because of everything I've read about ancient cultures and religious sects and all of these things, that's what it says. Even in Egypt, there was a not equal but different. There's a polarity there. There's a yin
Right.
and yang. It's
Of
that
course.
simple.
Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely. Like the descending body or the reception or the psychic is seen as complementary, counterbalancing, not below. And
Right.
that's even like in any form of esotericism that got kind of like Christianized out of it.
Right.
So instead of there being the absolute and the absolutes in the feminine form, the absolutes waters. So you see it as like a sea of awareness or there's always some form of waters like in gnosticism, even in hermeticism there's waters and then light, and then you could look at the light every time the light is it's funny because anytime we first start talking about the first light, which is what you would consider the male organizing principle of those waters,
Okay.
or like it could be light, warmth, fire. It depends on what system, so it really just depends, but there's always a form of light or yang energy. And
Right.
the yang energy um is seen as complementary, and
Right.
then like creation comes from the feminine. And so we can easily tell creation comes from the feminine by us being a fractal of as above so below. The feminine creates. But
Right.
they turned it around to make it sound that creation is a male
Right.
attribute. Oh, you're trying to take the male power. And
Right.
it's actually a perversion. They took the feminine power. The masculine power is like a Shiva lingam. It's a huge light penetration. I love Shiva. So the masculine principle still organizes and still creates,
Right.
but not as the creation the way that they have portrayed it. And
Right.
so I don't even know how we started talking about that anymore.
Well, I mean, I mean, yeah, that's all good. But I mean, the woman has the womb. And if you're talking about creation,
That's
well,
fun.
there's your smoking gun right there. How do you feel about Lilith? Considering that, in Genesis, you have Eve was taken from the rib. I've always considered that, and whether it's open to interpretation this wide or not, I don't know. But if you remove a rib, your heart is exposed, and I feel as if that was a bit of a symbolic thing about women being the weakness of man to his heart because of that rib being removed, rather than her actually being made out of a rib. But that begs the question, it formulates a sort of a first and second, man, woman. Whereas with Lilith, if which I'm not even sure what the origin of Lilith is in the first place, they were made simultaneously, which to me makes more sense, right?
Yeah, they were simultaneous, and then Lilith rejected Adam. And then that got lost in the story. Lilith said, "No, I don't want Adam. I want to go be." Because Lilith had, okay, so there's two females, and this is what's going to really help. And there's one female. Oh, no, there's two. There's one Adam, and there's one, you could call it Lilith.
Okay.
Adam Kadmon, as you may know, is androgynous. So
Okay.
there's a whole Adam. And then there's a whole, so Lilith represented, they made her out to be evil or wild, and it's really because she was whole. She was like the primordial female that you see before Eve. You'll see in old shamanistic portrayals or older ages, you'll see like she's hairy. She's hairy because she looks more like Mother Earth, and she's
Okay.
literally whole. And so Adam also was whole.
Okay.
And what these really so and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to turn girls into Harry. I like Eves. Okay, we must defend and protect the Eves. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm just teaching esoteric here. So what she had represented was a rejection of Adam. And
Right.
so then God, well, it depends because I don't even believe in this story, but God had then created Eve, which was going to be now more of the relatable, the way that Adam and her would be harmoniously relatable. And then Lilith flew off and said she's going to take everyone's first children now or something like that.
Right.
So, because she's all about like children, there's like scribbles. Has really great videos on the scribbles. So that was like an issue that people were worried about back in the day, was like Lilith taking
Yeah.
their firstborn. So she's definitely like, and then like she would be like a sex kind of like spirit. Like she would still be um not fully left, I guess you could say. So Lilith turned into an imagination, which is very common. But then in Masonic thought, Lilith is actually a state of the heart. So now let's just remove that story and let's look at it through Masonic
Okay.
thought. Lilith is actually when care, the principle of care, is not present. So Lilith energy actually is very apathetic energy. So if Eve, or if the divine feminine energy is supposed to be one that advocates, that's what the feminine energy is. I mean, I could go on, but I'm just saying one aspect of the feminine energy. The feminine energy is an advocator
Okay.
because the feminine energy holds everything. Remember how I said Lilith was whole?
Yes.
Okay, so how that interprets in like a positive way is the heart centers everyone. I am you, I am this person, I'm everyone. So the feminine energy is supposed to advocate, which is in Masonic thought or in Hermetic thought called care. You're
Right.
supposed to care. Your actions come from consciousness because you cared enough to be conscious, which is hard work, because you cared enough to make those hard decisions when apathy was telling you you don't need to, when the world's telling you to be apathetic, to care about a purse,
Right.
you cared about a person. So care is actually the divine feminine quality of going, no, you can't tell me to be apathetic and care about hating myself and buying purses because I'm not whole. They It's actually about caring beyond the Ahrimanic or the materialistic and caring for other people and souls and the planet and all of that stuff.
Yes.
So in Masonic thought, Lilith is the opposite of that. It's like a cold, dead, apathetic energy where care is not present.
Wow.
And then in esoteric Christianity, Lilith represents the wounded feminine, like all of the things that were not processed, all of the traumas that were not met, all of the things that happened and were inflicted on us, and then we never converted, transmuted into its gold. So Lilith represents what was not healed, what was not resolved, and creates almost like an archetype of that unresolvedness that becomes very like bitter, cold, because it's like it becomes like a collective large shadow that was never healed. It
Right.
becomes a collective like trauma archetype that wasn't healed, so that then you could progress to the next stage of evolution, but that's through anthroposophy.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. Absolutely fascinating. But I can't help but think that, like, apathy in a way is cancerous. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. I mean that literally, because if we take the words, to serve man is to serve God. So the axiom goes. To me, that notion is as simple as understanding the cells and organs and bacteria within our body, that they have to care to get along with one another in order for the entire body to function as a whole. The moment that one of those cells decides to be, quote, apathetic and not have care, and it's not cooperating with the other cells in your body, it becomes cancerous. And if you consider the as above, so below axiom to mean, which I know it's got many different, that applies to many different concepts. But if you apply it to the literal one, that would be, say, uh, we are all living within the body of the greater God, just like ourselves live within us. To serve man is to serve God. And in a way, the reason it's cancerous is because of how contagious it is to be apathetic. The best example I can think of is with greed. Whenever a person is deciding to take everything for themselves, let's say, the CEO archetype, so to speak, all of a sudden the person next to him realizes that there's about to be a limitation of resources and he's got to feed his family. So he begins doing the same thing to scrape up what he can. And then before you know it, the next guy is going to do the same. That affects the entire community and then the society as a whole. And in a really strange way, that's archons. That is what that feeding on the suffering of others is quite literally an archetype that people embrace in society by this contagion of apathy. We do it to ourselves. That's not denoting anything outside of our reality, of our visible reality that affects us, because those things are there too. You've talked about Lush many times on your channel, but to me, uh, on a more personal level, as above, so below, those things are present within us today. McDonald's is one of those things where, they are in cahoots with the medical industry. They buy stocks from each other, knowing that McDonald's is coming in, is going to poison the people before they're adults so that they can ship them off to the medical industry, who's going to have a endless amount of customers by the time McDonald's is done with you. And they buy each other out and they support each other. And it's a systematic form of loosh, of looshing an entire civilization. The weirdest part about it is that we see it happening and we don't stop it. That is amazing to me.
Well, actually, yeah, but you're doing a lot, so I hope you mean the universal we. But
Well, people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. So also it's incomplete without mentioning the astrology meaning of Lilith.
Okay.
Lilith in astrology means the aspect that you have denied
Okay.
because you were shamed out of it. So how you find the aspect is you go back to whatever your native temperament was as a child, and we'll call that a power because that's what this Lilith represents. So Eve represents a power that you're welcomed for.
Okay.
So actually my Lilith and my Eve are in harmony because
Okay.
they're both in Cancer.
Okay. So, okay, help me out with that.
Yeah.
My Lilith and my Eve.
Yeah.
Is this the concept of them that you hold within your psyche, or is
Oh,
this
your
something
natal
more
chart.
natal chart? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the Lilith will represent the power that you were shamed out of. So it's the power you're not allowed to have. Eve will represent the power that is the light side. So it's your, oh, let me rephrase that. Venus. Eve and Venus are what it's called. So Venus will represent the power that you are allowed to have. And so when you go back, my Lilith and my Venus are in Cancer, which means the power of Cancer is feeling. So that goes called, oh, you're too intense. That's something that I'm shamed out of, or Lilith. But then I have my Venus supporting me to be like, no, it's okay. Usually people don't have their Venus and their Lilith
Okay.
together. Usually there's a conflict, which makes it harder for them to retrieve their Lilith. So that'd be fun for you to get someone on who does your natal chart and find out what your Lilith is.
So I had Earth Alchemy LLC, who has been a long time member of this channel. She did my natal chart, and we had a phone call about it.
Oh, cool.
And my jaw dropped because this was at one of those on the fence moments where I was not sure. I was still tainted by the idea of astrology being like the strip mall horoscopes that we just talked about. And it completely eviscerated any bit of skepticism that I had when she described me to a personal level that was absolutely impossible. And then I looked at other results of natal charts that could have been, and none of them, they were all specific and had nothing to do with me. Mine did though, and I was completely blown away by it. Uh there was aspects to it that that I would have denied had I been asked, like to that level of specificness, and that blew me away. The craziest one too was that it tells you your, I forgot what the word for it is. It's not downfall, and there's a I forgot the
Oh,
word.
your fall. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a, I got this the book somewhere where it actually says it, but like there's a Libra and there's a Aries, and it said that Aries was my weakness, and that Libra was my catalyst, something like that. Nevertheless, my
North
ex-wife
Node?
is an Aries, huh?
North Node?
No, it's exemplary something. I forgot.
Oh, Exalted.
But then I saw that. Actually, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Where is this damn book? Because this is the book that Nico got me. Shout out to Nicorical. She's got a wonderful YouTube channel, and she helps me with a lot of my videos as well. And it turned out she's a Libra. Now she lives far away, but I mean, we still stay in contact for, doing our channels and stuff. Whereas my ex-wife is an Aries, and it said right there in my natal chart that that's what would happen. And I mean, I don't know if that's too personal to say on YouTube. I don't know. Maybe I think I share too much, but that's a fact. Me and my ex-wife get along great, by the way. But she did. She took me down, and I had a dark night of the soul because of it. And it's right there in the
Oh,
book.
I have that book.
Oh, you got, yeah. No, you can't not have this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to get the whole set, but which I just said what I meant to say, but I wish I could find the actual word. But nevertheless, that's the gist that I got out of it. I call these museum books, and I don't, no one
They're
else,
gorgeous.
right? And that my whole bottom shelf is museum books. This one in particular, I fell in love with. It's a Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they found a way to make it fun. Like,
Oh, okay. I have to get that version.
oh, this is W.Y. Evans and Wentz, and I mean, it's obviously very informative and everything, but that's the reason I call it a museum book, is it's like going through a museum in the comfort of your own home.
Oh,
Love
that's
it.
so funny. Like a coloring book for how
Yeah,
to get out of this reality.
exactly. My
You're like, now
favorite one of all
color
time.
in the lights not to go into. Yeah,
Right,
the
right.
smoky red.
Uh, this, I don't know if you have this one,
I do.
but yes, another one that you can't not have. But every page is a breakdown of
Gorgeous.
everything esoteric. And I was thinking about actually making a video based on alchemical plates from this puppy, because it does a good job of explaining it. By the way, guys, it is called Alchemy and Mysticism, and it is the best $30 that you'll spend on anything esoteric, and it's a broad spectrum of everything, um well, speaking of which, I've covered alchemy before, uh spiritual alchemy and whatnot. uh tell me a little bit about your own journey of alchemy that has happened throughout this particular year, because me and you both have had quite the 2024, if I might say, life changing 2024. A lot of people have had a crazy 2024, but I know you and I in particular have went from a, oh, it seems like a different life. It seems like a different reality now than it was last year. Like, what has been your journey of this year so far? Like, what's keeping the fire burning for you?
Creativity. I'm very grateful that I have creative stress because there's
Yeah.
this incorrect notion that stress in and of itself is bad.
Right.
It's just that we're in survival stress, the majority of people. And
Okay.
that's what I wish to help the world with. It's like,
Absolutely.
but stress in and of itself can be creative stress. And that's like why people don't get nihilistic. It's why people don't go, what's the point? Like it's if they don't have creative stress or if they're literally drowning in survival stress.
Okay.
So my creative stress is divine and I'm so grateful for it.
I
Actually,
love that.
sometimes I just take a moment to pause because my sister told me, she like texted me randomly the other day. She's like, I hope you know you're in your prime. I hope you take it in now and you don't look back and you take it in later. And so now I just take like like spaces because I'm so busy. I'm very, very busy.
Right.
But now I just take spaces of gratitude to go like, I have creative stress because I'm always creative. I'm very
Right.
creative. So I'm always creating something. And
Right.
so I'm just grateful that I have creative stress.
You can't turn it off. It
Yeah.
right.
No, it
And
oh, that's another thing. It's the law of compensation. When a person has a talent, whatever that is, they get more of it when they're using it.
right. You, the practice makes perfect. If you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah, I've seen that. And the way you describe that is perfect. I just got done reading Timaeus and Critias by
Okay, I
Plato.
need to read Timaeus. I have to read it.
It's a classic for so many reasons, but one of the parts in particular struck me as like an epiphanous moment. Whenever Solon is talking to the ancient priest kings of Egypt about ancient lore, primarily Atlantis, he he goes out of his way to stress the fact that the reason we have amnesia now is okay. So the mountaineers and the farmers up in the mountains who weren't swept away by the flood were illiterate, and even though they understood the names of the gods and the original kings, they could pass on the names, but they could not pass on the knowledge and the wisdom and the deeds, as he put it, to the other generations. Thus we had a clean slate and everything started over from scratch, minus those Promethean figures. But then he says the reason we have amnesia of ancient wisdom is not because those survivors were illiterate, it's because they were completely predisposed and consumed in survival mode. Everything they said, did, and eventually, when they got writing back, was completely dedicated to the survival of themselves and the species. So they were tunnel vision pigeonholed into surviving in such a way that doesn't matter if you're illiterate. Oral tradition maintains, thank you, Jay Dreamers. Oral tradition has maintained strong throughout survivors of all great cataclysms. But so that's not an excuse to have amnesia. The amnesia comes from anxiety, from only putting all of your energy now, instead of gazing at the stars at the end of the day and putting the pieces together and creating, because we're co-creators in this reality. That's why we're here. It doesn't matter who you are. You're playing your small part in something big, and we are co-creators in this reality with God. If not, we are that completely and totally within us. But I found it to be inspiring to know, because there's been moments in my life where I could not be bothered with what the pyramids represented because I had to pay my bills on time before the electricity got shut off. That is something that will put a ceiling on the most creative person, doesn't matter how gifted you are. If you are shoved into a world of chaos where your only means of staying your head above water, pun intended, is to survive, your ability to co-create is nipped. And that's where I think, what would you say? So let me turn this into a question for you. If there's people out there watching who are just trying to get to their next paycheck so that they can survive and pay the bills, but they yearn to be creative, what can they do to use this as a fuel rather than being decapitated by it?
I've thought about this a lot because I've tried to see how I went from my poverty to,
You too,
you
huh?
know, I try to track it, and what I noticed is that no matter how poor I was, I mean, it's because I'm a projector about studying. I never had time to kind of like be
Okay.
more than me. And you can't make somebody tell their emotions.
You're breaking up a little bit, and I think
Here,
you froze for a moment. Can you repeat that last sentence? I can
yeah,
hear you
can you
now.
hear me? Okay. So what I'm trying to think of, because I think about this a lot. Because I'm at this point like Shiva, happy dancing for change on earth. I am not scared. I am not sad. I am happy dancing for because I don't I don't like suffering. I don't like people like
Right.
this model is only meant to squeeze out of people, not even blood at this point, whatever's left after that, sucking a person dry. And so it does, but anyways, so I think about this a lot. And I feel like maybe it's because I'm a creative person and a double Leo that I have always thought big, and it never stopped me. Because of that, I didn't think of what's that other person? Let me like I always thought, even if I didn't have money or things, I was always visually creating, and that's where my energy went. And because of that, um what I would say to people is this, because it worked for me: find anything. It doesn't matter how poor you are. Find anything that gives you life force. Something has to give you life force.
Mhm.
And life force might not show up as passion, it might show up as curiosity. So
Okay.
you might, whatever it is, at one point in my life, I had no will. I was, I had no will at all to continue because I was being negatively interacted with at a non-physical realm. And it just got really hard. I had no quality of life. And I was like, what's the point? This
Yeah.
is effing weird. What's the point? I'm just here to suffer. And what I got a lot from my guidance time and time again was, you're not here to suffer. Because I always go towards the negative. Like whether it's
Okay.
shadow, whether it's whatever, like I always go towards the negative. And so, but then you could get caught. You might know a lot of knowledge there, but that doesn't mean you have quality of life. So you could
Yeah.
get caught in that. And then, so I had to get strong messages that was like, guess what? You didn't come here to suffer. You didn't come, you keep doing everything to suffer. So I had no will because I kept learning things or having experiences that don't make money, that don't pay any bills, that make me non functional, and
Yeah.
gave me no will. So one little shred of hope I had was, all of a sudden I started watching Xena in my like 20s. I never watched it as a kid.
Shout
I
out to
never
Nico. That's her Nicorico's favorite show ever. She references to it on a regular basis. This is so fun to hear you say that as well. Because that is like the ultimate feminine archetype warrior. That's awesome.
Oh, are you kidding? I became obsessed with that show and I had life force. So then I went to Paris to a freaking convention. I had no money. I did those like weird things where you go way into debt
Yeah.
because they like shark you because they know you don't got any money, so they give you something anyways. I did a shady thing to get a credit card just to go to Paris, to go to a convention. And let me tell you something, I was at rock
Wow.
bottom. So if that gave me life force, I'm not going to judge it. I
Yeah.
actually had something that like gave me energy. And so I know that
Wow.
it's hard when you don't have any money and you're like, oh, great. Yeah. What do you, and I'm just going to say, like, this is coming from love. This is not coming from a mean place, even though it might sound mean. That will get a person nowhere. The universe doesn't even respond to somebody going great. Like, love the one who did that, love the one who feels that way, but if you stay in that space, it
Yeah.
just contracts more and more and more.
Yeah.
Find anything, find anything that it could be like curiosity. It doesn't have to be like a show. Find
Right.
anything that gives you life force and just trust that it will grow into something else and trust that it will grow
Yeah.
into something else. But don't try to see it in advance because then you'll put too much pressure on the life force.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful answer. And curiosity is something that, I mean, I think leads to passion in the first place. And I get asked very often, I mean, so I make albums, music, videos, YouTube. I wrote a book, whatever. People are always asking me, they're like, hey, I want to do a thing. I want to put a thing out there. And they say, but I can't because I don't have this, or I can't because it's not time yet for that. And I can't stress this enough. You have to completely fill out that entire sphere of what you can do with what you've got right now.
Yes.
And then the universe has no choice. The next thing will come the moment that sphere is completely filled and you can't add another drop of nugget of anything into that sphere. You'll get a knock at the door, and the next thing that you need will show up. And my example, I guess, would be making documentaries on YouTube. People will be like, "Oh, I don't have a camera, or I don't have editing skills, or whatever it is." So they won't do anything. And or a musician will be like, well, I don't have a microphone, so I can't. So they will do nothing. And it's literally this simple. If you want to do one of those things, write something down with a pen and a paper and have that written, or write out a plan, whatever it is, or play an instrument, or practice talking. You don't have the camera yet. Go practice talking. Go to an open mic night, or call up a friend and explain one of your theories to him. Whatever it is, do the thing that you want to do that you don't have the stuff for. And once that sphere, that world of what is possible now is completely filled out, the next one will come, and there's no way around it. I don't know what causes this or why the universe works that way, or if it's just manifestation of on a practical level. But if you do all you can, 100% of what is possible to you, it will. The next step will literally fall into your lap, and there's no way around it. And when I say I can't stress that enough, I mean I practice it on the daily. I want to do if I want to do a thing and I can't do it yet, I do everything that can be led up to that point, and then afterwards, you don't even have to put forth any effort. It it the door completely opens to the person who has prepared for it to happen. And that's kind of the thing is when you prepare for something to happen, it's I don't know, maybe law of attraction, cause and effect, correspondence, whatever your favorite word for it is, it works. But what you can't do is just sit there and imagine it. I mean, daydreaming is very healthy and that should be exercised. I mean, there's nothing against it, but without action, nothing will actually happen. And I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up about when it comes to words like manifestation and whatnot. I think we project reality a lot more than we do take it in. And I know there's a feedback loop that is the total of reality, but if you get to pick which way you see it. 90% of people we know have the concept of reality that they are taking in reality, like they are receiving it. Therefore, things happen to them. Whereas when you go out of your way to shift your paradigm of vision, of thinking, to being a projector of reality, you start to you start to do it. And there, lack of a better scientific terminology there, when you see it that way, that's what happens, you know?
Totally. No, you said that perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
Manifestation, though, is a male word, in my personal opinion.
It's got the word man
It
in
starts with man.
it.
Yeah.
Right. So my woman manifestation. Could we switch that? I'll make it less. So
Yeah, no,
what would be the feminine version? I wonder.
so there's female energy, that there's feminine energy to manifest.
Yeah.
That would be known, well, we're scared of this term in the West, but that's not the dark side. That would be like black tantra. It's where like you're calling, you're receiving. It's like black, but not black in the negative way, black in the
Right.
void, like creation. So
Right.
that would be like when you're visualizing something and you're receiving it, or like you're aligning with your desires.
Yeah.
You right? We're scared of that, so we don't understand that that's actually the raw materials to create. But then the male is action.
Okay.
Manifestation is actions that we take, and without those actions, then we cannot manifest
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
powerfully.
No, yeah, yeah. The female energy, the feminine energy, which is something that can be embraced for any man listening. You take it from me. I'm a construction worker. I'm very lucky to currently be retired from construction. I don't know how long it's going to
Okay.
last, but I haven't worked in about 6 months. Thank you to all you guys right here in the chat. But take it from me, especially if when I got into construction, I was well aware of my feminine nature, right? When it comes to writing, playing music, creativity. I love the Tao Te Ching. I'm not saying it's a feminine manuscript, but it's got, I don't
Right.
deny the feminine energy within me. I'll write a poem. I don't care. So getting into construction, these guys, these young men, they feel an urge to be as tough as these old guys who come from the union days of the back when, murder was a trend. Like it was like these guys are hard, right? And they want to embody that masculine energy, so they become not authentic, and it's poisonous because these old guys, they can sense it. In this specific example, these old guys can sense that like it's blood to a shark, and they feed on that. Whereas if you embrace the feminine energy within you, and that means you're not competing, now you are complementary to this world. So articulation, uh reading blueprints, for example, creative thinking to solve problems, and I'm still talking about construction and the industry itself. It There are problems in construction that require illogical thinking in order to overcome. So instead of trying to instead of trying to like exacerbate your masculine energy to fit in, you do the opposite and embrace the feminine side of yourself. You become something that is someone who's sought after within the industry, and that's the least likely place that you would expect that would be a thing. Uh, Lo and behold, it's the same, I think, for any avenue, whether it's a hobby or a career or just interests in general. By having a balance between the feminine and masculine energies, you've got that middle path as a direct straightaway path towards whatever it is you're aiming at. Now, I don't know if that has to do specifically with the brain being left and right, or if it's got a more divine alchemical connotation to it, or probably both. But embracing the two together, I think is, sheer the only way to go. And there's no surprise, because if you look at any alchemical diagram, hell, if you pick out one from random, you're gonna see these androgynous uh, symbols. So let me ask you about that, actually, because and if anyone can find an alchemical diagram that is not some sort of union between a man and a woman, I'll be the first to be surprised, because that's typically what we see here, whether it's literally a man and a woman, or captured by moon and sun, any other there's a million different ways to put it, but that's what we're looking at here. uh what can you tell me about embracing this part of ourselves within spiritual alchemy?
Oh, so much. The whole work is about that. The whole
That's
work.
right.
Okay, so whether it's Christ, Christ was actually the balance of perfect love and perfect wisdom.
Right.
So we all have the Christ principle within us.
Yeah.
So that's androgynous. So even Christ is an androgynous. So they're all whole. So whether it's that, or we look at alchemy strictly from, Hermes, the father of alchemy. He represents divine spiritual light.
Okay.
Theosophy even went so far as to say he was the logos or divine mind. You'll always see, okay, Hermes, hermaphrodite. So you'll always see this wholeness play out, and that's what the alchemical depictions are about. But before I forget, I am so happy for you. You don't have to work that construction job anymore. And you're
Right.
doing this, but do you understand this is the law of compensation? The universe is compensating you for the sincerity of the services you're providing it. Okay, so there's a need for what you're doing. There's a need, first of all. Sometimes people want law of compensation for not things.
Right.
There's this really important thing, and it's not just like anyone ever can do it, but it is niche enough, and you are dedicating your life force to it. And that is the law of compensation. And I'm so happy. And may that just continue to grow. And I
Thank you.
know that I actually love your I don't I hope you don't take this the wrong way.
I won't.
I love your block or your wound around like rich boys, or like I know you got that
They got
that
no
thing there, like
character.
I'm still real.
Yeah.
I'm still so like I know you got that go. I had that with Sabine Hosenfin, that physics woman. I was like, oh, she talks like a robot. Oh, she talks like this or that. Then I had to integrate her because I was so triggered. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to integrate like a rich boy, but I
Dude.
had to integrate her. She doesn't bother me anymore. I'm not
Oh,
triggered at
good.
all by her. Yeah.
Well, you got one
So
up on me because yeah, anyone, and it's my problem. I'll admit that anyone who doesn't have to have real worry because they were born into money, I don't, I can't see them. I don't see anyone in there, and I know this is me. This is my problem, and I need to fix this about me because I'm wrong. I am wrong,
okay, you
but
don't need to be wrong, but your heart knows where to grow now.
yeah, I don't see.
Because
There's no
okay, let me
character. There's no grit. There's no salt in the stew. And I maybe I'm meeting the wrong ones, but whenever I meet someone who, I'm going to stop right there. But
no,
let me first say
that's
that
okay.
about
Okay.
what you said a moment ago is that I don't want to jinx it, but service to others. So when you're talking about, so I'm not working construction right now. I'm very grateful. I get up every morning at 7 a.m. and I work on this, and I treat it like a job. I take a lunch break and I stop working about 3, maybe 5 o'clock. So I in no way have I decided to take a vacation, and I think that's what it is. There's but a lot of people who have YouTube channels who saw mine go from 0 to 130K in less than a year and a half. They ask me what the secret is, and they're expecting me to tell them something about the algorithm or about thumbnails. And no, none of those things. Or to be topical, to cover current events. Never have I. The If everything that you do comes from a place of service to others, like what am I going to say and show that is going to affect at least one person, if not an entire block of people that helped me, and therefore I can pass that on to somebody to help make their life better. There's a huge difference in creativity between uh, doing something, making art that is meant to be shown to people, and art that is meant to be kept and not given back or received back. That is literally the defining factor between making art that is a career and making art. This is something I had to realize about myself when well, I'm still a musician, but when I would write songs, especially back in my like black metal, death metal days, I was creating something that was meant to be shown to people, whether it was to be shock or to like-minded people who enjoyed the music. It was meant to be shown. The moment that I shifted that to service to others, how can this song, how can these words, how can this picture help somebody? That's when it started being received. That's when I started getting compensated for what I was doing. And you can tell somebody that, and it'll either go in one ear and out the other, or they'll will understand it, but they'll forget to practice it. It's something that you have to manually make yourself do. And hopefully saying that was enough to deter your attention from me not liking rich people.
No, I was just waiting.
Ah, no. All right. I had to bring it back up. That's my fault. I did this. I
But
did
I
this
knew
myself.
that you were deterring my attention, so I was more quiet so I could let you go down that road.
Like, hurry up so I can get back to your weaknesses. Let's go. Come on.
No,
No,
no, it's fine, but one day you might find your heart goes, yeah, you're welcome too.
I hope.
And bodhisattvas have a mission, and not all of them is to start from scratch. Some of them start like to a higher mind. Money's just an instrument.
Yeah.
And so, I actually had so I have a lot of celebrities follow my Instagram, a lot.
I seen, yeah.
Yeah.
That is wild, by the way. Uh-oh. Wait.
Wow. I said that and then that. Okay, so I have a lot of celebrities that follow my Instagram.
Right.
But there was one who put me in her stories, and it stretched my heart. I'm not going to say who it was, but
Tell me
I
all of it.
was
Tell me. Give me all of this.
no, I'm not going to say who, but it made me go, Sarah, if you make that impact and it affects this person and this person, and you're not paying attention to them, but they see you, put yourself in their shoes and go, oh, well, she'll probably think I'm too famous and rich and I'm too stuck up. So I started like putting myself in unity consciousness with people who
Yeah.
are at, and I went, oh, and that grew my heart. And I was like, yeah, well, no, like I would not want someone who has a different role in life, a different whatever path in life, to then go, oh, I'm not included in her heart space. She teaches a lot of great spiritual concepts, but I'm not included there because I don't fit her community.
Oh, wow. No, that 100% makes sense because, yeah, no one should be uninvited to the heart space just because of, I mean, heck, Siddhartha was born a prince. He was born in a palace. But
I hope you be I know that I'll probably get richer before you because of this black, but I hope you get rich because I want people like us to get rich to go make a water slide around the United States or something more purposeful, like,
yeah,
like help communities.
right. The moment I've got the money to do so, it's 100% going to be put into travel, which is I already got. So remember earlier I said you got to fill out the sphere completely before you can actually do it. That's where I'm at right now. Is I bought the little shirt microphone thing that hooks up that wirelessly to the camera, and I've got little brochures for places to go. Ayahuasca is on my list, and
Oh,
and
right
I
on.
want to go and I want to record myself in these places. What I don't want when the money comes is a new car and a new couch or whatever. A lot of people, that's something I'm grateful for about myself, is that's something I don't have to overcome, is possessions and material. As you said, our last chat, I love aesthetic, as same as you. I like decorating my house in such a way that is pleasing and nice.
That's
But
dope.
but yeah, but in no way do I ever feel this urge to to collect things and get the newest model of iPhone or whatever it is. So any money that I do receive, I'm grateful to have discernment about what to actually do with it. And frankly, even at the income that I'm at right now, I give it away. I give things away. I'm still very actively involved in my union. So I'm a glazer, a St. Louis glazer, Union 513, and I love apprentices. And when they need tools, and they do, because tools are expensive and they're not making the money they need yet, I buy them tools. And I know that those tools are going to be used in their hands. And that makes me feel awesome. And so it's one of those things where overcoming greed and wanting money versus needing money is something that a lot of people have to overcome, just like I have to overcome my prejudice against people who are born rich. But that's just one of those things that I'm grateful that I don't have to overcome. Money to me is nothing compared to experience. So I would rather buy a big dinner for my loved ones than buy a new toy, so to speak. And that's a very grateful thing.
Beautiful. Hey, so I said what I was happy for. What your 2024? Can you share what you're happy for?
Yes. First of all, every single one of my subscribers, that goes without saying. But I broke a record for most memberships to a YouTube channel in one year.
Wow.
So
Whoa.
in 2024, my channel got more paid members within that time span than any other channel, which does make sense because I'm not doing fishing or video games or anything like that. This is something where people see it and they say, I want to help him help me. So they become a member, which being a member for this channel just means that you get to see the after premiere chats and a little bit of yoga here and there. But also the Patreon members. People have joined the Patreon and they've sent me messages being straight up like, I don't know what the perks are of your Patreon. That's great. But here is a monthly payment to continue doing the Patreon. Basically, you get the videos a week early. No one really needs that. But the Patreon is taking care of me right now, whether they watch those videos or not, because they understand that if I'm in a position to not have to go to work every day, I can do this more enthusiastically and so let me get off of that for a moment when it comes to 2024. Uh, the biggest one I think has overcoming heartache. So, and it's no secret that my divorce was a catalyst of my dark night of the soul, which was a catalyst for this channel uh, entirely. I went from a place of having that as pain, I'm talking about a constant pain, like a sharp, oh, like you wake up and you're like, it wasn't a dream. It's real. And I have to do it again. And it's bad. And anybody who has that fear in their heart, like, especially going through the divorce, you have this like idea, like I could end up that guy at the end of the bar with the gray beard who's just sitting there smoking and just lives with it. Or I can literally embody alchemy, knowing that this suffering and this friction is going to kindle a flame of some sort. I don't even have to know what the flame is, as long as I let that spark happen. Because of that alchemy and because of seeing the results from that alchemy returning in that feedback loop, that heartache went from pain to me actually being grateful to my ex-wife for having, oh, should I say, set me free. I still love her very much, and she loves me very much, and we're wonderful co-parents. And we spend time together. We spend time with our kids together as single people. And it went from feelings of betrayal and pain to me literally wouldn't hesitate to say thank you for dumping me, because it created uh, a world within that I didn't know was there. Like, I thought I knew myself. Everybody thinks they know themselves. But when your entire foundation collapses and everything is that you thought you were, that the persona completely burns up in that fire, and you realize that there's nothing left. Your cup is empty. You can take that two different ways. You know, when your cup is empty, you get the privilege now, you get to fill that cup now with whatever it is that inspires you to be you. And it's going to be a new you, because you can't hold on to the old guy. You can keep little quirks from that old persona here and there, but what happens in that tragedy is what hurts the most, is that you see yourself with the capital S, not the self that you have been parading around, the guy who tells jokes at the party, and the guy who this and that. And that all when all of that is washed away by heartache, and your foundation is gone, you're forced to look at what's left within, and that little stone within you that can't be avoided anymore. And you have to, and it surfaces, and it's agony. And then you sit in that agony. No alcohol, no nothing to cover up the pain, and you just live in the pain. And all of a sudden, you find yourself at rest in the agony. When you are at rest inside of that box, that black box, you're set free. Now, there's still hangups here and there. There's temptation. There's all of these things of the outside world that are going to snag you, and that will keep going forever. But within the core of who you are, that self with the capital S, now that you've seen it and faced it and embraced it, there's nothing else that can bother you anymore. You can't. There's no fear anymore. I know that, and this is going to sound weird. Uh, to walk in my profession, I got to walk to the edge of a building, 30 stories in the air. It doesn't matter, 14 stories, whatever. You got to move that swing stage from one end of the building to the other, and that's at the end of the building. So you put on your harness and you stand at the edge of a skyscraper, and then you have to reach out above everything, pull the pin, do the things that you got to do, move the swing stage. For the first time in my life, I this this will sound negative, but it's not. I felt nothing. I felt nothing from looking down and seeing the heights. It used to give me a perk of adrenaline, and once the fear of death was gone, you're set free. But the only way to not fear death, and this is what's really crazy, this is what the pharaohs understood, this is what Moses had to go through, and this is what I think Gobekli Tepe was for too, but that's a working theory. And what they said was this initiation that you'll be going through to become from an apprentice to a master, or whatever version of it, a novice to this, whatever it is, that rite of passage from boy to man. uh if you it's said in different mythologies, if you have any guilt in your heart, you won't survive this initiation process. So being able to be set free enough to fear nothing, including death itself, hinges almost primarily on being free of guilt, which is a really weird specific thing. But I think the reason it's specific is because we have a word for it. The word guilt segregates it and categorizes it into a specific thing, a feeling that we feel. Whereas actually, the concept of guilt itself is a very character encompassing attribute that is felt by people on a subconscious level way more than they understand. Uh, as little bitty things like, say, judging the person in line in front of you at the gas station for buying scratchy lotteries at 7 a.m. It's very discouraging. It's a tiny little bitty thing, but with a little bit of patience and introspection and having that kind of self initiation, and an emphasis, by the way, man, shout out Manly P Hall, self initiation is the truest form. You don't have to be part of a club. You can, in a way, absorb that guilt and let it go. And when you are, and I'm not saying I am, but when you are free of guilt, you don't have to. What I mean by have to, there's no more pressure for you to fear anything, to have to do anything. When you're guilt free, you can let actions flow out of you and surrender the results. So I know that was a little long winded, but from subscribers to that realization, I think action more accurately encompass my 2024. It's one of those things where new level, new devil, if I might steal one of your lines, but those devils are a lot easier to deal with if you can embrace your own guilt, that shadow.
Yeah.
But
And you'll have manifestations of that come through golems of, trolls sometimes. So I hope you just don't let that lower your vibration, because that definitely, there will be people that try to shame or guilt you into like you're wrong. I don't mean to put that wound on you, but like
it's
something
okay.
that plays off of that, because
Right.
that's the archon realm, right?
Yeah.
If we're looking at this about like what you meet when you leave, like if that is strong within your field, which it sounds like it's dissipated, and so there was a massive healing that was provided, that's great. But yeah, that's great, because guilt can really confuse a person, and it's one of the lowest frequencies.
Yeah. Guilt is worse than shame, I
Yeah.
think. So it's difficult to shed, especially some people are guilt can stem back to childhood. I think way more than a lot. Obviously shame does too. um these things are taught, but guilt in general, this is why I'm particularly careful with my kids, because whenever they do something wrong, I want them to know that the action was wrong and not they are wrong, because I don't want them to be instilled with the same inherited guilt that I had. It's still something that I struggle with, because when you have guilt, you can't be authentic. Nothing that comes from you will be pure. So it's something that is worth wrestling with, if one, if you ever get the chance. But I don't know. It's an ongoing process. I'll tell you this. I had to, and I'm still trying to get rid of the urge for closure. I'm not talking about my marriage, by the way. I'm talking about everything. I want everything to be complete and have a nice cap on it, and for it to have closure, like to be like, okay, this is solved, this is figured out, this
Yeah.
is put together. That will never happen. There is no closure to learning, to the alchemical process. Plato left Critias unfinished. It ends mid sentence. I think that is a perfect way to say that don't complete the great work. And if you try to, you're gonna struggle with it, and you're gonna die with an empty feeling. Let go of that closure, knowing it will never come, and then feel pride. Pass the torch onto the next generation to be completed. I think that's why Critias is left unfinished, because Plato wanted us to finish his work. He didn't want us to sit that every time we have a doubt or a curiosity, run to Plato for answers. He wanted to be what, now obviously what he was. I mean, he was, I don't have to say, it's the cornerstone of philosophy, of everything that we hold esoteric. But by leaving Critias unfinished, he single-handedly he walked the walk. He was an example of saying, I died without finishing my work. Now it's up to you. And here we are today, the two of us, And I guess that's our difficulty, is to carry that torch without having the urge to complete the work, because we won't. No one ever will.
Yeah. I find that I've given a lot of release to the concept of truth.
Okay.
Not saying that I don't strangle it anymore. So I'm still committed to truth, but now I don't need it to apply to an all-encompassing truth of the omniverse.
Okay.
I have my truth, and I'm very, and actually that's probably the best thing that ever happened in 2024 to me.
Okay.
It's that I fully understood now why there's so many conflicting narratives with all the different esoteric type of knowledge that then gets turned into some sort of like gnostic, like, oh no, that's no, that's the false light, that's the false light. Like I truly understand now the false light, and because of that, it's given me a lot of peace to kind of like expand my perception of this multiverse, which went through a huge expansion last year, huge. And now I'm just committed more to finding out and restoring a lot of the models that I think will be very useful for us moving forward,
Yeah.
but without ever needing a completion to the actual system of the
Right.
whole multiverse and omniverse and what have you. And there's and that's what I think is spiritual sovereignty. I think it's having enough confidence now to discernment to go, okay, I can navigate infinity. Not say, okay, no, I know all of infinity. No, I can navigate infinity. I trust myself to navigate infinity.
Yeah, that's profound, because Itzhak Bentov, one of the main things that he said is that stillness and infinity are literally the same thing, not just separated by poles, but scientifically speaking, infinite speed is the same thing as stillness. And he illustrated this by a pendulum. The pendulum's moving back and forth, but at any one given spot, whenever it reaches the apex of the pendulum, there's a very slight moment of non-inertia where that pendulum ceases to exist, uh, quantum physically, literally ceases to exist for just a moment, and then begins swinging back in the opposite direction. And by finding rest, he noticed that that same concept can be applied from quantum physics to consciousness, which to him was bound, entangled in exactly the same thing, to where he noticed that he could stop time subjectively, but with and by meditation. And that kind of that goes along with what you're saying. And the pendulum goes to show us that, yeah, there's no completion to it. That the process continues on without us. We have to be content and feel complete with just being a nugget as being part of that process. Alan Watts says you're not a result of the process. You quite literally are the process. And once you can accept that, you can feel a lot better with not completing things. And I'm a champion at not completed tasks, which I there's some things I need to get done around here or whatever. But before I let you go, you caught my attention with what you said about the multiverse, especially this last year, has expanded. You got me dumbfounded on that one. Uh what's going on with that? So the multiverse thing, are we talking about the result from the double slit experiments about parallel universes, or are we talking about something more metaphysical?
Nice.
Uh-oh.
Sorry,
Some
that was me.
That's all right. All right.
That was me. Um, no, more like why people think that some angels are fallen and rebellious and defied God, and why others think that it was actually God who is the evil one. Like I get it all now.
Okay.
I have like I understand. I gave a transmission in Austin, and it was so It was almost like I felt like I've never been like attacked energetically while I was giving a transmission before, but I got that much because it was trying to shut it down. It was such a profound and intense transmission, but it unpacked so much that I've still been integrating and upgrading and understanding deeper, and it just makes sense now. And now I understand why one dimension, or let's say density,
Okay.
will hold a truth, and that will be absolutely true in that density. That's their perception.
Okay.
But then it might not be expanded enough to incorporate another truth. So it
Right.
might be in oppositions to a lower density. So then you get conflicting narratives all the way down the densities because they have completely entirely different truths and completely entirely different perceptions based off of those truths. So by the time you get here, we're meant this is I did a video on this. We're meant to reconcile a lot. We're not here to go, "Oh my god, like I'm nothing. We're the full fractal."
Right.
Humans hold the full fractal. Not every being holds a full fractal of all the way. So
Okay. And
anyways,
this is
I'm getting
why
off of yeah.
humans are made in the image of the Elohim or whatever. That so this doesn't necessarily apply to jellyfish. It's something that humans in particular. Is that why we have the divine spark above?
Yes, yes. Okay, so we have the divine spark. The divine spark is a fractal of it all.
Okay.
So not everything has the divine spark. So some things could come in and try to make it sound like they have more or they know more or oh, you're in this small position and stuff. But no, we actually have the full fractal blueprint that
Right.
comes from the 12th dimension. But anyways, so that's kind of related to what I'm saying, but that let me just get back on my major thesis, which was that it seems rebellious when you're coming from two different levels of perception.
Okay.
One being the highest level of perception, which now I understand why some people think we're in a simulation, and I totally get it, even though I don't think we should focus and feed the energy that will disconnect us by using that word.
Right.
I still understand how projecting your consciousness into these experiences from a much, 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 much higher perception goes, look, it was just an experience, bro. Whatever. It's dead now. It just combusted. God could look like a psychopath from that level. So then
Okay.
you need angels to come in, and they might look rebellious depending on whether it's Yahweh, which is pretending to be God at fourth density, or whether it's literally what they just combust. There's no big deal. At a higher density you need angels, which are essentially just higher dimensional beings who have made a choice
Yeah.
to service to others, to
Yes.
hop in and go, oh no, we have to help them know they're the full fractal. We have to know them they're trapped. We have to they're trapped. They need to know they're the full fractal, but they're getting gaslit by the false light Yahweh. And also they would look rebellious anyways when they're being the adversarial force, okay, the oppositional force to a larger, more probably less concerned, because I'm not saying less concerned in a negative way. I'm seeing like a completely different perception. It's
Right.
just a different perception. It holds a different truth. So it's not negative. It's just going to look cold to us because we're literally in the experience and the experience is real. So
Yeah.
so I was kind of getting a download in Austin about how what we consider fallen angels and how
Yeah.
we've pegged them as negative isn't always the case, even though beings fall. And I did a video on the fall. So I'm not saying nothing falls. But what I'm saying is a lot of times angels start looking like they fell or getting framed like they fell,
Yeah.
when really they're the ones that are intervening to
Yes.
help them. It could go on. So I hope that made
That
yeah.
no, that is an epiphany in itself, because I mean, number one, you've illustrated that truth is subjective according to the breadth of a particular reality, and this in this dimension, if you live in a 2D dimension, you can say that we have left and right. And those are the directions what we have. Immediately upon going into the third density, whatever it is, that statement now by default becomes false. So you have this weird paradox where you might even say this the next sentence is true, and then underneath it that first sentence was false, and there's like it loops around. But what that seems to indicate is something that I have been wondering for a long time. We are taught that Lucifer is a bad guy. In fact, Lucifer, if you ask any typical person, is the devil. But if you actually dig into the esoteric versus the exoteric of what that means, he's a Promethean figure. So, like, Prometheus was punished by God for bringing humans
Exactly.
fire, and the snake, the serpent of Eden, was punished by God when he gave humans knowledge of good and evil. This is the same archetype of Lucifer. So, if you think about it, and then you compare that to the way that Yahweh treated Job and the other guy who was trying to cut off his sons, you start to realize, wait a
Which
second.
programs you into poverty consciousness. The Job story programs you into slavery consciousness, saying you have to be a good slave. Things are bad, riches are bad, everything's bad. Do you have to like it is a I'm gonna make sure this gets ingrained in your human psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a Gnostic story. I know it's not, but I think,
Mhm.
to me, so let's just say that truth is subjective. The story of Job, the
It is.
canonical story of Job, reflects a Gnostic version of God.
Yeah.
Whenever Carl Jung wrote about it, he said the obvious things, but then he was like, well, if Yahweh was the demiurgos, well, in order to grow his own consciousness, considering that the demiurgos is not not omnipotent, he would have to feed off of Job's suffering in order to grow his own conscience. Not conscious, but conscience. That was fascinating to me because it paints a picture where all of a sudden, and this is heresy to even say, you get burned at the stake for saying this kind of stuff and maybe even get some unsubscribers. I don't know. But like, which is just as bad, obviously. But when you think about that, the serpent of Eden, Lucifer, Prometheus, they're punished for sharing wisdom and knowledge. You start to wonder, who's the good guy here?
Yep.
Who's the bad guy? Have
Yeah.
we? Because they say that the devil's greatest trick was convincing humans he didn't exist. Well, the Gnostic might take that further and say his greatest trick was calling himself God. And
Yes.
I wonder if figures like Lucifer, no wonder he's called the morning star, and so is Jesus Christ, because both of them are doing the same thing. They are bringing light to humans in such a way to save them from this cosmic syntax error that might be called simulation, might be called the fall, whatever your favorite mouth noise is for it. Something happened that caused physical reality and all the struggles that come with it. And there is an entity, so there is something very big and powerful upstairs that wants to keep it that way, whether it's to have a battery or for whatever. But then there's these figures who come to Earth, uh, Quetzalcoatl, Veracocha, uh, these Promethean figures they're warning us. They're saying, hey, yes, there is a divine source, this one and all God that is pure consciousness, and everything lives within that. But the guy that you're worshiping currently ain't it, and you've been tricked. And I don't know what the result of that would be, and I don't even know if a mammal brain would even be able to comprehend the implications of what our purpose would be within the crosshairs of a being like that. God forbid. I mean, Job, there's a lot to be unpacked there. But these fallen angels, maybe the reason that they're fallen is because they came down to help. If you look at Siddhartha, whenever he passed his human body, he decided to stay on on Earth in whatever general forms to reincarnate as long as it takes, he said, in order to liberate suffering for all humanity. In a weird way, does that make him a Promethean figure like Lucifer? I don't know, but in a weird sense, I almost wonder if the names have changed, but the story stays the same. I wonder if all these mythologies and all these spiritual religions are all talking about the same thing with different names, but in reverse. It's it's almost really hard to swallow because the notion immediately puts you at odds with 90% of spiritual people, whether they're religious or spiritual, which I think, if I may, the adjectives religious and spiritual, I think they're opposite. But it puts you at odds with the majority of people. But if the winners are the ones who write history, as above, so below, maybe we've got it all backwards, you know?
Well, you have different types of souls here. So you have people that won't ever grow into this truth because they're just not mature enough. And so then they'll go into more of like a worship energy, like worship gene.
Okay.
And that's fine. They have their curriculum. They have their curriculum just like how everyone has a curriculum. But but yeah, it's more about like a ripening. It's more about like how a maturity where and so yeah, I do think a lot of the spiritual systems helped a person who were ready to,
Hmm.
and then a lot were muddled in with fallen types of narratives.
Yeah.
And I know that if I was a fallen being, I would frame the ones who were trying to help. And so I mean, let's just leave Lucifer out of this because I know people who've had awful experiences with Lucifer, awful. And then I know people that say, no, Lucifer is an entirely feminine energy that is here helping humanity, streaming her light to humanity, to help it. So Lucifer is a huge, huge topic. So I know that I don't want that to be equated mainly with my thesis, but yeah, along the lines of Prometheus, or yeah, along the lines of any type of higher dimensional being who enters this arena and wants to help the person awaken their inner Christos, or help the person um, awaken to that they're the full fractal.
Right.
And that they're in spiritual amnesia.
Yeah. To understand that we are the full fractal, which, by the way, a great way to phrase that is on its own is a comforting notion, because you can feel small and big at the same time. And that's where I think science and spirituality can truly brink as a crossover, and to the point where people realize that they need each other, because science, as will compare you to the cosmos and you'll feel small, whereas spirituality, you have heaven, is the kingdom of heaven is within, so you feel big. So, and you can pick one all day. Thank you, Tim and Miranda. uh Eve eating the apple was a choice. It said blah blah blah. Oh, it's going away. Okay, surely die if you do not. Why'd you censor die? And they had a choice to leave the garden to help humanity. Oh, real quick on side note on that, I couldn't help but notice that when Cain left, there's a family of four: Adam, Eve, Abel, Cain. When Cain left the family, because I guess it was getting too crowded in that town, he went into the city, where he found that he was exiled by everyone in the city. No one liked him. but he took on a wife. Who are these people? And it helps reinforce the fact that it's an allegory, just like a lot of these allegories are a template. Yes, they are based off of a literal happening, like the story of Noah's Ark was based off of the Younger Dryas event. There's always a spark, a seed, a nugget of literal happening that causes these things. But the allegory itself, I think, works as a template, especially Adam and Eve, that it could be a template that describes temptation. It could describe adultery. It could describe it's semen retention. I think the one, what's the guy's name, said it was about that. I guess that's what I want people to realize when I say the names have changed, but the story stays the same, is that mythology is subjective. And we use it as a template to illustrate an abstract thought that escapes our language based thinking in a familiar way. And the reason it's familiar is because it's an archetype that resides, I think, within the DNA or the ultra conscious mind of all of humanity. There's certain stories that every single human on Earth recognizes as being self-evident, and when we want to make a point, it's easy to illustrate abstract notions using mythology and stuff like that. Sorry that they put $5 down. I had to go on to that tangent right there. But all right, so we are going on over an hour, no, over 2 hours now. I don't want to keep you, but I can't leave you without asking what you have planned next. I want to know all about Sarah E. and her plans for the future, what we can expect, what's going on in your world.
Oh, so much. So I'm really excited right now. I'm plotting out my first season with Gaia on Mystery Teachings.
Is that
And
what's be
after
called?
that,
Mystery Teachings?
yeah, it's going to be a spin-off of
Okay.
the Mystery Teachings. So it's going to be a part of the Mystery Teachings franchise, but just like my series.
Do you get to meet Greg Braden and Dr. Joe Dispenza? You get to, like, is
I
that,
better meet Greg Braden.
oh, you did already?
No, I
Oh,
haven't. I better be able to. No, I love Greg Braden actually. So
Linda Moulton Howell is like one of my so the Gaia Network. There's a lot of those guys. I just love them to death. Linda's one of them. I hope you get to
I don't
meet.
know who
I've
Linda is.
always wanted to meet her, Greg, Joe. I'm gonna kick myself for forgetting some of the names, but I love the whole network, and I hope you get to meet some of them. But so, what's your plan? What's the layout? How I don't want to, if I don't want you to have to spoil anything, but I'm very curious about it.
Oh no, it's just I'm plotting out right now, kind of like before we go into filming
Right.
the content, like breaking it down, which is completely opposite of what I normally do. I just usually just start doing my makeup, tune in, start writing notes, and then push the camera and just go. So this is a lot more organized, so it's going to be a challenge for me to structure stuff cuz
Yeah.
usually I just structure as I go. But yeah, so I'm really excited about that, and then at some point later on I'm going to start my in-person events
Okay.
in the spring or maybe summer actually, because I'll be still in kind of like my retreat mode. So basically, what I have lined up so far, oh, and a book, coming out with a book.
Oh,
I'm going over the manuscript now. So
yeah.
anything that has to do with structure is taking a little longer or being a little challenging. But yeah, so my alchemy retreat that's this March is going to be my next kind of like if I had to if I had to give you like a definitive time frame about like what exactly my moves are this year, it would be that I start filming in February and then I go off to my retreat in March. And then I need to somewhere along these lines, like really dial in on my book because it's all about paradox and duality and kind of being able to navigate that. I really view that to be if people can understand that, I believe that that's the key to sovereignty here, at least in this reality, for at least what truth represents in this version of reality.
Yeah.
Not speaking for all of reality, but what giving us full sovereignty in our own ability to discern and clarity through kind of laying out the dual keys here. And once we have that down, once we've mastered that, tricycle wheels are off. Now everything that we're doing is not needing, we're like
Yeah.
dependent on this thing. Now it's like, oh, okay, that person is a really great guide, or that
Right.
person really expanded my mind, or that's, it's not like a I don't know how to live. What is this? You know what I mean?
Right. 100%. Well, I can tell you, I cannot wait to read your book, and I cannot wait to lay eyes on you on the Gaia Network. The first time I see you standing and speaking with that backdrop and with all that, with the graphics, oh my God, I'm gonna freak out. Like to see that happen, because I mean, like we met last year, and so much has happened, and it's so inspiring. You are living proof that a person with an idea can grow that idea in a very short amount of time, as long as uh, they have the power of authenticity and the drive behind them, and to see your growth and to anticipate the things that you're about to do is just is exciting for everybody involved, and I can't wait to see it happen. And
Wow.
you are
Thank
one of
you.
the people who remind me to stay the course, no matter how distracted or discouraged I become. I look at Sarah and say, dude, she went, she's got this YouTube channel. She owned the real estate on the esoteric YouTube, and then she didn't decide, the ceiling was there, blasted through it, and decided to do, I mean, the speaking, the talking events, the to be able to get in front of people on stage, and then with Gaia, I can't wait to see it all unfurl, and I can't wait to see how far you take it. And speaking of that, would you be so kind as to join me 1 year from now, and let's talk about 2025?
I would love to.
Uh,
And that was so much. Thank you. Like I'm gonna really sit with that later. Like that was so beautiful, and I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you appreciating it, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And if anybody here is not subscribed, I'm sure you already are. Please go subscribe to The Alchemist, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you, Sarah. Bye.